What is up, guys? It is Marcus from Perspective Sports, and today we're going to talk about Ravens quarterback Joe Flacco and 3 potential landing spots for him. As we all know by now, Joe Flacco gets hurt, Lamar Jackson comes in, plays fairly good, gets the team to the playoffs. A lot of people want to go with Lamar long term. The rumors start to come out that Ravens are going to trade Joe Flacco, and you know the story. But if I'm the Ravens, I'm not necessarily in the biggest rush to trade Joe Flacco because Lamar Jackson, we've seen it before with these running quarterbacks. He's going to have to become a better passer, and there's no way around it. And we've just seen it too many times. This is going to work. The running, the option is going to work for the rest of the season, and then next year it's not going to work as well. We've seen it too many times. And to have Joe Flacco on the roster, and we've seen it with the mic up, I've seen it on the sideline during watching the games, he's helping Lamar. So to have a quarterback like Joe Flacco guiding Lamar in the right direction, helping him with the reads, teaching him the playbook, that could benefit you long term, but I do understand you got to get the getting while the getting is good. So the quarterback class in free agency is fairly weak. The draft class fairly weak. And so Joe Flacco on a relatively good contract compared to what Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins, what these other guys are making, he has a fairly fantastic contract. And so that means his value is only going to go up. And so to have a Super Bowl MVP, a Super Bowl champion, a long-time starter like Joe Flacco in the trade market right now, the Ravens can cash in. And I do understand that if they take that route and cash in while they can. And when you look at Joe Flacco, people want to argue, is he elite? Is he not elite? I'm not going to get into that. The guy can win you games with the right roster. And that's why 2 of the 3 teams on this list today, I think, in all reality, Joe Flacco can put over the edge and get into a deep playoff run, maybe even get to a Super Bowl, maybe even win it. I don't know. But I think Joe Flacco will definitely get these teams in the discussion to win the Super Bowl. So without further ado, let's dive right into it with the first trade. And that's Joe Flacco to the Jacksonville Jaguars in a deal that'll look like this. The Ravens receive quarterback Blake Bortles, a 2019 Jaguars second-round pick, and a 2019 Jaguars fourth-round pick. And the Jaguars receive Joe Flacco and a conditional 2020 fifth-round pick if Joe Flacco doesn't play in at least 5 games. And I think this deal is fair for both teams. And let's start with Baltimore. You're probably questioning the acquisition of Blake Bortles, which makes sense. But at this point, Jacksonville will have 2 quarterbacks on the roster, making a considerable amount of money. And so instead of cutting Blake Bortles and having to pay him the money, they just ship him to Baltimore, who can afford to take on the contract. At the end of the day, it's still $2.5 million less than Joe Flacco's contract. Plus, Blake Bortles has an out in his contract after the season. And so you hold on to Blake Bortles for a year, and then you move on. He's off your cap. Or you pick up the last year of his option, which isn't likely. It'll pay him about $18 million, still $500 less than Joe Flacco is scheduled to make that year. So as for Baltimore, you trade Joe Flacco, you get the second-round pick, you get the fourth-round pick for taking on the Blake Bortles contract. That still saves you money in the short and long term. As for Jacksonville, they get a franchise-caliber quarterback. Say what you want about Joe again. He's still a Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, and has thrown over 3,100 yards in 8 of his 11 seasons. People say he was carried by the Ravens defense, so put him with the Jacksonville Jaguars defense and give him some offensive pieces, and who knows what Joe Flacco can do for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And moving on to the next deal that'll see the Baltimore Ravens trade Joe Flacco to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in exchange for a 2019 second and fifth round pick. This deal works for Baltimore because I don't feel like any team drafting this early will be willing to part ways with the first round pick to acquire Joe Flacco, because when you look at the Bucs, they're just bad. And when you see the amount of defensive talent that's slated to go early in this draft, the Buccaneers aren't going to pass on that. They'll survive another year or two with Jameis Winston until they can get to next year's quarterback class with Tua Tagovailoa, Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason, now Justin Herbert, and they'll just wait the year out. They're not going to pass on the amount of defensive talent when they need defense more than anything. So Baltimore will likely settle with a second and a fifth round pick, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be able to use that money that they would have overpaid for Jameis Winston to have Joe Flacco on the roster and continue to build a roster around that, and potentially, down the line, draft another quarterback to take over for Joe Flacco, but with a much better roster. Because I'm not sold that Tampa Bay actually wants to move forward with Jameis Winston as their quarterback with his off-the-field issues, his on-the-field issues, and on a multitude of occasions have made the case that the Bucs are a better team when Ryan Fitzpatrick is leading the team. Deshaun Jackson becomes more efficient. Mike Evans becomes more efficient. The offense as a whole becomes more efficient. But Ryan Fitzpatrick is 36 years old. He's still inconsistent and not a guy you can have in the long-term plans. But instead of overpaying for Jameis Winston, you'll get a veteran guy and end up saving money by trading for him. Because on Spot Track, it has Jameis Winston's market value at $22.2 million a year. And I don't think Tampa Bay wants to do that to themselves. And I think they'd rather go with Joe Flacco, who's a better quarterback, on a cheaper price tag. And finally, for the one team that may be willing to part ways with a first-round pick to acquire Joe Flacco, and that team is right down MD 295, and that is the Washington Redskins. And in this deal, the Ravens will receive a 2019 Redskins first-round pick in exchange for Joe Flacco. The Redskins have had awful luck, to say the least, when it comes to the quarterback position. I truly feel bad for Alex Smith and Colt McCoy. I've always rooted for those guys, Smith being one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. Colt McCoy, a guy who I love watching at Texas. I read the books about him. Playing with Purpose is one of my favorites. But it appears Alex Smith may not be able to play next season or ever again, meaning the Redskins are in serious trouble, and they have a talented enough roster to make the playoffs, but not talented enough to make it without a starting caliber quarterback, and that's why I feel they'd be willing to part ways with a first-round pick to secure that quarterback. As for Baltimore, this is a dream scenario, first-round pick for Joe Flacco, and this works for both teams. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think. Where do you think Joe Flacco will go? What kind of deals do you think would get you to part ways with Joe Flacco, or what deals would you be willing to trade for Joe Flacco? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'll see you there.